On May 29, 2020, Juan Gudino, a 62-year-old husband and father of four, was gunned down while working at a renovation property in San Diego owned by South Coast Commercial, LLC. Just 2 weeks prior, the perpetrator, Ronnie Kong, had threatened Mr. Gudino with a machete and later a handgun on the same property. Despite these threats and police involvement, no additional security measures were implemented to protect workers at the property. The property was owned by South Coast Commercial, LLC, managed by South Coast Commercial, Inc., and was being renovated with workers from Rent Ready, Inc., all three companies controlled by the same individual, Brian Nelson. Nelson was well aware of ongoing criminal activity at the property, including crackheads breaking in repeatedly, and had specific knowledge of Kong's dangerous behavior and threats before the murder occurred. Today, our investigative news team sits down with Christopher, founder and partner at Ardalon & Associates law firm, to discuss the very unique challenges and hurdles the case presented and the strategies they crafted which led to a successful outcome of this case. Their strategy focused on premises liability and third-party criminal conduct theories, but the case presented multiple complex challenges. 1. Proving that a third-party criminal act was foreseeable and could have been prevented by the defendants. 2. Unraveling the deliberately convoluted corporate structure designed to shield assets and limit liability. 3. Demonstrating that defendants were aware of the danger but chose not to act to save cost. 4. They also needed to overcome legal defenses related to coverage disputes, statutes of limitation, and attempts to avoid alter ego liability through legal technicalities. This case exposed the dangers posed when business owners create shell companies and alter ego entities to avoid responsibility. At its core, this was a story about a hardworking family man who was placed in harm's way by an employer who knew of the danger but failed to take even minimal steps to protect him. Christopher has earned a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world, and repeatedly wins. And his amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Thousand Oaks. It is my great pleasure to introduce Chris Ardalon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm and what you guys specialize in.
Yeah, we have a boutique trial law firm out in Thousand Oaks, California, and we really specialize in catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases for people that have been harmed because of the carelessness of others.
So Chris, tell our audience, who was Juan Gudino?
Juan was a hardworking man who provided for his family. He was a loving husband, a loving father. He worked as a handyman for almost 3 decades. And he worked with the same company and person for many, many years, who he would go in and do a lot of the handyman work. He would help with the construction. He was reliable. He was honest. He was a good man. And he lived his life with the philosophy of being not just an upstanding human being, but also a good father and a husband.
What happened May 29th, 2020?
Juan was working that day on a project that was owned by a man by the name of Brian Wilson under an LLC that he had formed. He was a real estate developer. He would buy properties, fix them up, flip them, and he had a couple of different companies that he owned. One, he was the president of the LLC that would own the property, and then he would create a Inc., that basically a corporation that was managing the properties. And at some point, he decided to partner up with a general contractor so that he can internally handle the construction of these properties through another company.
Usually, why does someone create so many entities? What's the purpose?
Well, it's usually to protect themselves, right? So he had the LLC when it's owned, it protects in terms of his assets because the LLC under the law is seen as a corporation and it's its own entity. So if there's a judgment against the LLC, it doesn't seep into the personal assets of the owner. The corporation that's doing the management, well, they don't want to mix up the management company's responsibility with the property liability, so they separate that out. And then on the construction side, there's a whole slew of things that can go wrong in construction, as you can imagine. But you also need a general contractor with a license to be able to get the benefits of probably the discounts on the materials, the ability to get the permits and all that. So in order for him to do what he was doing in his empire of building all these homes and flipping them and doing all these different projects, I think he encapsulated a concept where he would create these separate entities for his venture, his capital ventures.
I understand there was some ongoing criminal activity at this property, which wasn't being addressed by the owner, correct?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. It wasn't actually on the property they were working on. What made this such a difficult case was that this property that they were fixing up to be able to get leased out and eventually probably sold at a profit, there was another apartment complex next door. And in that complex next door, living in one of the units, was a man by the name of Ronnie Kong. And Ronnie had a mental illness. He had issues that was creating him to be paranoid, violent. And his mom, who was overwhelmed with having to deal with her son with this situation, had also made comments to the owner that her son wasn't right, that there was something wrong with him. And Mr. Nelson, who was kind of leading the project in terms of the area, was getting notified that there were a lot of problems during the construction. People were coming in through the windows that were being boarded up and squatting there. So in the mornings they would show up and there was random people squatting within the units. There was things where they were breaking part of the windows. And in a lot of the exchanges and discussions, you could see that, this was a financial investment. He was making poor decisions about how to address those problems. But those problems aside, the big issue in this case that happened is that Ronnie decided that he was going to start interacting with the workers that were working on this property, including Juan. There was an incident 2 weeks prior where he showed up with a machete. He was threatening the workers. This was communicated to Mr. Nelson. We actually got a 911 audio from Mr. Nelson reporting that this man was there with a machete and threatening the workers, and that maybe there was text or there was things that were said that he thought he was maybe a tweaker, or there was some drug addiction or something that was causing him to behave like this. He also had a conversation with the mother that he knew that there was something wrong with the son. And so he had all this knowledge base weeks before this incident happened. And our major issue and criticism was, well, what did you do about it outside of calling the police? What steps did you take to protect these workers from someone who's showing up at the property with a machete, but you're sending them continually back into this space? You have to have some ownership or responsibility for that. And there wasn't. And 2 weeks later, Ronnie Kong shows up with a gun and shoots and kills Mr. Gudino.
Let me ask you, in a situation like this, what should have the owner of the property done to protect the workers there? You call the police, that's one thing, make a police report, hire a security guard.
Yeah, I think it would be, if you know that there's people actually breaking into this property and your workers are showing up and there's people sitting in those units, if you know that people are coming over the property with machetes, at a certain point on other properties that they owned and managed, they did have security guards. There could have been someone hired to make sure that the workers can focus on what they needed to do, is to do the work and not have to be threatened. Maybe it would deter that kind of conduct from happening. In construction sites, they put up fences to not let people come in so they don't fall into holes. Well, that's a risk of an accident. But when you're seeing in front of your eyes people are actually breaking into your property and actually threatening your workers, do you sit and say it's a police problem, or is that your problem?
It's both problems, isn't it? So your strategy in this was you approached this as a premises liability case and a third-party criminal conduct case theory, right?
As far as the owner of the property, one of the things that we were having to navigate was the fact that insurance coverage usually doesn't cover third-party criminal conduct, and it is in the law, third-party criminal conduct, unless it's foreseeable, a person's not responsible to protect against it. So there were difficult legal issues that we had to overcome. We also had to deal with this concept of whether or not Mr. Gudino was going to be deemed an employee of these companies, or whether or not he would fall outside of the scope so that he wouldn't be thrown into the workers' comp system. Because in California, if you're employed and you're suing your employer, there is workers' comp exclusivity, which makes you not able to bring a civil lawsuit. You have to go through the comp system, which deprives you of a right really to a jury, and the compensation is oftentimes much lower.
In trying to determine the defendant's liability, what difficulty you had in getting insurance coverage, policies, information, etc.?
Well, we learned through discovery that South Coast had the LLC part of it had, I think, one of them had $2 million insurance, one had $1 million insurance. The company Rent Ready, which was the construction arm of the property, had another $1 million. So we knew we had $4 million of coverage there. But one of the problems we had is, well, who was actually paying the checks to him? And so we got the paychecks, and we saw that there was a lot of confusion. He was doing work for all these companies, but the checks for this project was coming through the LLC that owned the property. And they were trying to distance the construction company, saying they had nothing to do with this project. The difficulty I had was I didn't know whether we were going to be able to prove that there was some responsibility on this ownership for this random criminal act until we were able to subpoena and get information from the police and see and hear the statements that were made, as well as the 911 recording. We pushed really quickly to be able to get the deposition, hoping that the defense wasn't going to have the discovery, because my gut told me that he was going to lie in deposition. They were going to prep him to pretend he didn't know anything about this. And even though they asked for stuff in discovery, we objected and said, hey, that's equally available to you. It's a public record. We're not turning it over. And they didn't push to get it. And sure enough, in the deposition, they came in very cavalier, like there was no responsibility, and the owner committed to statements that were completely contradictory to what we had found through the police records.
Surprise, surprise, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think my gut paid off on that. And we did actually, the questioning that I did really made him feel uncomfortable, and saw that the contradiction and lies came to light. And as a result of that, we came back and I drafted a very extensive demand letter to the 3 insurance carriers saying, pay the policies. The ownership, the LLC, and the Inc. that was doing the management ultimately tendered their $3 million. But the company that was the construction company, who had convinced us to let him out earlier of the case because they said we didn't pay the checks, we weren't involved in the project, they said no. They offered $50,000. And so we brought them back into the lawsuit. And our theory in that case was that this was kind of a shell game between these 3 companies, that these were really all Mr. Nelson, and these companies were all set up to push his venture, and these were alter egos of one another. So there should, whatever responsibility is on these companies should mirror the responsibility of the construction company, which wasn't an easy legal argument, and one that they had a lot of defenses to, both on coverage as well as legal liability. And that made that getting that last insurance to pay anything very difficult, and they fought us for a long time on that.
How long did the case take to resolve?
I want to say we must have been litigating for at least a year from the point that the other 2 carriers ended up paying out. They brought motions for summary judgment to get the case kicked out. There was a very threatening legal argument that was convincing because they brought coverage counsel in that because Mr. Gudino was a handyman who didn't have a contractor's license, under the law he was deemed an employee of the company. And if they were an employee of the company, then the insurance coverage had an exclusion, that there was no coverage. So there was infighting happening between the insurance company's coverage counsel and the defense counsel and us about whether they would even have to have an obligation to pay anything. Ultimately, as a compromise to get this resolved with motions pending for summary judgment and some inquiries by the judge that caused concern for us that we were trying to work around, we ended up settling with that last defendant for $650,000. So we were able to get a recovery of $3.65.
Congratulations on that. I understand that we have Mr. Gudino's children here today. So let's bring them on right now.
Yeah, we have 3 of the adult children. We didn't bring the minor child that was there and the wife. This has been very emotional for them, and we want to make sure that they're protected. But they really lost something significant in their life, and I was honored to be able to represent them and try to give them some statement of value.
Yeah, I'm glad your law firm and you were able to get them a successful resolution here. With a difficult client, I'm not a difficult defendant, all of whom never want to pay a dime, right? So let's bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jasmine and Juan Gudino. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being on the show, by the way. Jasmine, tell our audience a little bit about your dad, what you missed the most in him.
Well, the 23 years I had my father in my life, I felt safe. I never had to look behind my shoulder, didn't have a worry in the world. I was a princess. And the day he was gone, it's like the world was after me. I didn't have my protector. I didn't have my father. Started being more vigilant about stuff, and then that's when I noticed real life is real life, and it's dangerous out there. And it's like my dad protected us so much from a lot of bad things, you know? And when he was gone, I kind of had a fiend for myself, and I learned a lot, and I learned that he was right. Everything he said was right. I'm happy I did have him for 23 years, and I think he shaped me to be how I am. I'm very independent, and I'm very confident. I like to speak up for people and help people, and that's kind of how he was. He always lended a hand to everyone. I remember being younger and kind of being like, Dad, why are you giving them money? Give me money. And he'd be like, Mija, like, you know, they need help right now. Just, you know, you're fine. You don't need any money. And I'd be like, oh, Dad. And we'd go on to the orphanages and give away like my clothes and stuff. And I'd be like, Dad, I still wanted to wear those jeans. And he's like, oh, you're just being, you know, you need to learn to let go of stuff, and people are going to use it and they're going to be so appreciative. So growing up, going to the orphanages, giving food out to homeless, and he was just very giving and loving. Everybody knew him for that. So that's kind of how I am. And I like to be the way I am. I like to be giving. I like to help people. It feels good.
Now, 2 weeks before he was shot, this idiot showed up, Kong, and threatened him and I guess some of the other workers. Did he talk about that at all?
Yeah, so he would get home. It was during COVID, and he had his little work mask on, and he'd be eating dinner, and he'd be speaking about how he was getting harassed at work. And I was getting angry, and I'd be like, Dad, like, who is it? Tell me who it is so I can go, like, throw rocks at him or tell him to leave you alone. And he actually lied to me. He told me it was a white man, and it ended up being like a Filipino man. And he's like, oh, no, it's a white man. Like, just, you know, leave him alone. He's fine. Like, he's just not right in the head and this and that. And I was like, no, Dad, like, tell me who it is. And he's like, what are you going to do, little girl? And I was like, I want to protect you. And he was like, I'll be fine. So then just kept going to work for the next 2 weeks, you know? And the day I got the call, I kind of already knew because the person on the other line was kind of hysterical. And I was like, my dad. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, my heart sank. I turned like pale purple. I was serving. I was working at the time. And I had a chance to look at my phone and it was blown up. And I was like, oh my goodness. I screamed in the middle of the restaurant and I ran out. And I had to drive across the Coronado Bridge, which is like a mile-long bridge, I guess. And it's really tall, and I was like shaking, and I was like, damn, like it has no, the shoulder is so small, and I was very nervous, and it was already playing on the news. It was already on Instagram. People were sending it to me. It was being recorded. Somebody actually recorded him bleeding out and put it on YouTube, which I'm not sure if that's like legal or not, but I didn't want to see that. And we all got to see it. My mom, my dad, my mom, my brothers, my whole family. It was really hard, but I like to think that he died as young, as old as possible. My dad was very like, he didn't want to see himself like, he didn't want anybody to see him suffer or be old, or he didn't want to depend on anybody. I couldn't picture my dad getting like help when he's older. He was very independent. So he left us with the memory of him being very strong. You know, I never got to witness my dad like with the cane or in a deathbed or, you know, sick. So I kind of am appreciative for that. But at the same time, of course, it's not ideal. I just like to think of it that way. I know he wouldn't want to be bedridden, you know. He was a very strong, active man.
I see you, Juan, sitting there listening and taking this all in. How's your mom doing today?
I can say that she's okay right now. Honestly, it was very hard for everybody, especially my mother. I remember giving her the news about it, and the first thing she said was, no, she didn't believe it. None of us did. But I remember her saying, I don't want to be alone. I can't be alone.
Does anybody live with her right now?
I currently do. I had a very long talk with my mother because the whole situation was getting to us, and I could feel myself getting sick. My mother was getting sick from the stress.
The grief.
The grief is difficult, and I sat down with my mother and had a very long talk with her and came to agreement that, you know, I told her, I'll be here for you if you're here for me. But we both gotta be strong for each other. If not, you know, it's gonna end us.
This is almost 5 years to the day, isn't it? May 29th.
I was just speaking to somebody this week about it being 5 years, and it doesn't feel like 5 years.
Yeah. So what do you and your mom do together to bolster her spirits?
She tries to honor my father by doing what he used to do. So she is more involved in church, and she is helping people, like my sister was mentioning. My father was always helping people, even if he didn't know them. And I think my mother's way of keeping him still alive, you know, it's by continuing to do what he used to do, by helping others, you know, however she can, volunteering more with the church, volunteering with different organizations and getting a lot more involved, which is good because she was really going downhill. And, you know, she needed something to keep herself occupied, keep her mind off of the whole situation.
How are you handling this?
You know, a lot of times when I'm stuck in a difficult situation, I ask myself, what would my father do? And I understand that I am not my father. I will never be him, you know. He left some very big shoes to fill. But I can think about, you know, what he would say to me in certain situations. And like my sister was saying, he was always right. He was a very wise, knowledgeable man. You know, for somebody that didn't go to school or have a proper education, he would surprise me by knowing a lot. And I used to think to myself growing up, like, how does he know this? Like, he never went to school. And it wasn't until later that I found out that he would, lock himself up in his garage and read encyclopedias.
Really?
You would never suspect that. And he just knew all kinds of things about different history and everything. He always had a solution and answer for something. It wasn't just us that would go to him for help. Other family members and friends. My dad was the man that you went to. He was the one that whenever you were in trouble, he's the person you went to. So when this happened, I had nobody to go to.
By the way, I'm just curious, Kong, he shot your dad. Did he shoot anybody else there or what?
No, just my father.
He did. He let off shots the day before inside his own home with his mother inside the house. And my father called the cops, and the cops came, and the mom wouldn't let them inside the house, and they just left. Even though shots were fired inside the home. Yeah, same gun. Yeah, mom's love.
Was that the San Diego Police or the Sheriff's Department?
It was the City Heights Police Department. Yeah, so San Diego.
Well, my condolences to both of you. Losing anybody that's close to you is difficult to walk through. And thank you for being on the show.
We lost him physically, but I feel like he's still here with us.
Well, with that big smile on your face, I know he is.
Yeah, I still feel like my whole family is very united and we're very strong, and that's because of him.
Yeah, we have your other brother here. So we're going to bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce another son of Juan's, Gilbert. Welcome to the show, Gilbert.
Thank you for having us here.
So, Gilbert, what are your fondest memories of your dad as you were growing up?
I can say all the family trips. One thing about my dad was, for some reason, I don't know how he did it, but every year we at least went 2 to 3 times to Mexico. And one of those times was usually for about a month and a half. And those were the best times growing up.
We're in Mexico, by the way.
In Colima. And we would drive down there. Like Mr. said, he would always take things. I remember one time, me and my brother were so happy because we took a truck and had a camper, and we thought we were gonna be laying down all the whole ride. When we get to Tijuana, my dad had already things there that he wanted to take down to Colima. So we filled up the back of the truck where me and my brother had about 1.5 feet of space between looking at each other. So we drove for about 2 days in the back of a truck, just looking at each other the whole way. But besides that, it's just, he never really, I can't say that we were rich or wealthy, but we were rich in a way that we always had vacations. We always had clothes, we always had food, we always had anything we needed. And for me, the biggest things were those family trips. Just going out there, taking us to the rivers, taking us hunting, just out there, And it's something I would like to probably do with my kids. I try, take them out, little vacations here and there.
You can't make up that time. When you're 90 years old, I wish I'd done that when I was 30, right? Some of the advice that you remember that your dad gave you about being a good person, doing the right thing, what are some of those things that he would mention to you?
He always just said, just help everybody else. Help everybody. It's just, I guess it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, you never know what somebody's going through. Also taught us never buy anything if you can't buy it 3 times over. And I always think of my dad, I'm so happy I'm not like a credit card person and like a debt person. He always taught us to save. And like he said, we always, we were not rich, but we had transportation. We had a big, ugly minivan, but it drove, it picked me up from school, it got me back, he taught us a lot. When I was younger, I think I was 8 when he bought me my first plot of land. It was a very small little piece of dirt and it had like a pig on it. He got it for like $800, but when I turned 18, he sold it, and he sold it for like $2,500, and bought my first BMW, and he was like, "You see how that worked out?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Well, he sold it because you wanted a car instead of the land.
Where was this plot of land?
It was in Mexico. He just had found it, and I kept it forever. When we would go visit Mexico, he's like, "You want to go see your plot of land?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, take me." And it's just like bushes and like a little chicken running around. And I'd be like, "Is the chicken mine too, Dad?" And he'll be like, "Yeah, everything on this is yours." And it was like probably as big as this, like smaller. But I'm happy he showed me how to flip and hustle, because that's kind of what I like to do as well, you know? And he was just really smart like that. Always make sure you know where you're stepping, you know, watch your feet. He hated dragging feet. Yeah, pick your feet up, you know, it's like do your hair, like just very good. He would go for walks in the morning at 6 a.m., you know, he was just very proper. So I'm happy he was who he was and how we had him for a very long time. He had him longer, so I'm jealous, but we also have a little brother that had him only for 13 years. He didn't come, but he's 18 now. He graduated yesterday, and I'm pretty sure my dad impacted his life a lot too, even though he doesn't really like to talk about it, but he's definitely at that age, you know. So we're letting him be for now. Maybe later on he'll be more comfortable. It was very, very graphic. He got to see it all. And he actually, since it was COVID, he was going to work with my dad every single day. And the day my dad died, it was a Friday. He asked my dad if he could stay home to play video games. And my dad was this close to telling him, "No, you have to come to work with me," because he took them to work since they were like 5. And my little brother's like, "Please, I want to play video games today. Can I stay? It's Friday." And my dad was like, "Fine, Tony, you can stay." And like, I think about it every day because I love my little brother. And I just think if my little brother went to work with him that day, he would have been gone, because that guy, he let out 8 shots, you know? What's to say, like, he wouldn't have easily killed my little brother, you know? And he's not little, like, he looks like he's very tall and big, you know? So I know that guy, he was not in the right mind. He would have definitely got my little brother. And that's where I feel like the whole family would have fell apart, because that's our baby.
Gilbert, you weren't there that day, were you?
See, I was in Tijuana. I was picking up my daughter.
Your brother, Juan, he wasn't there, right?
He called me when I guess he got the call. I had just crossed over. Had just gotten home when he gave me the call. And he didn't tell me exactly what happened, but he told me I needed to go to my mom's, and something had happened with my dad. And on the drive there,
I already knew.
I kind of felt it. And all I can think was of my mom had told me that my dad had mentioned about the guy
He was being harassed.
and everything a couple weeks before. And so when I got there, Juan told me, and he let me know exactly what was going on. And at that point, it's like your world goes black. You can't think.
Even for like a week, I feel like you don't feel anything really.
It doesn't feel real.
Yeah, you feel like you're in a nightmare.
The hardest part was that when we called to try and see where he was, to see if we can go, since COVID was around, they were saying that they wouldn't let nobody go into the hospitals or anything like that. And they wouldn't tell us exactly which hospital he was taken to, because they didn't want us to show up. Just being at home while everything's going down, and just being on the phone and seeing the updates.
And I think he was alive for like how many hours? For a while. The SWAT team came, so the paramedics couldn't even get to his body.
That was the worst part.
Yeah, he was just bleeding out. And his time of death was like hours after he got shot. So I'm still left wondering if,
There was something that could be done.
yeah, if something could have been done. I know he got shot in his hand, his legs, in the stomach. I mean, that one would have been bad, but who knows if the paramedics could have got to him earlier. Just the standoff with the shooter and the SWAT team just ended up with them shooting the suspect.
Well, my condolences again. Losing anybody so important to you is tough. And I want to thank both of you and your brother Juan for showing up today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.